My name is Audrey. I'm 27. And if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd probably hate me. You'd see the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Boston penthouse, the ones that overlook the Charles River. You'd see the minimalist furniture that cost more than your car, and the abstract art on the walls that my husband, Marcus, picked out from a gallery in Soho. You'd see Marcus himself. 30 years old, a jawline that could cut glass, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from a 7-figure salary in private equity he provides. He's stable. He's perfect. A perfect husband for a perfect life. But perfection has a sound. It's the sound of expensive silverware clicking against porcelain plates in a dining room, so quiet you can hear the ice settling in your water glass. "How was your day?" Marcus asked, his eyes not leaving the screen of his phone, where stock tickers scrolled in a relentless, silent dance of green and red. It wasn't a question. It was a line in a script we'd been performing for years. "It was fine," I said, pushing a piece of asparagus around my plate. "I went to that new exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts. The one with the post-war impressionists." I waited, holding my breath for a follow-up. A spark of interest. "Anything." He nodded, a faint hum of acknowledgement in his throat. "That's nice." Then his thumb was moving again, swiping, tapping. The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was a weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. He loved me the way one loves a valuable asset. He kept me well maintained, ensured my needs were met, and displayed me proudly at corporate dinners. But he never looked at me. Not really. He saw the wife, the elegant accessory to his successful life. He didn't see Audrey. I'd grown tired of waiting to be seen. That night, tucked into my side of our cold, king-size bed, I found my escape. In the blue light of my phone, I wasn't just Marcus's wife, I was a voice. I was on a forum, one of those niche corners of the internet for lovers of classic literature and philosophy. I posted a scathing, sarcastic critique of a modern poet everyone else seemed to adore. I called his work emotionally vacant and intellectually lazy. I expected a few likes, maybe an argument. What I got was a private message from a man named Reese. "Emotionally vacant is too kind," it read. "He writes greeting cards and calls them poems. It takes a certain kind of bravery to say that out loud." My fingers flew across the screen. We talked for hours. He was a photographer, a creator. He saw the world not in profit margins and portfolios, but in light and shadow, in moments of raw, unguarded truth. He didn't just listen to what I said. He understood the meaning beneath the words. He saw the sharp edges of my mind, the parts I had to smooth down for Marcus, and he found them beautiful. For the first time in years, I felt the exhilarating thrill of being truly seen. Our conversation stretched late into the night, a secret world of words and wit. When I finally set my phone down, my cheeks aching from smiling, I saw him. Marcus was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, a silhouette against the hallway light. My heart hammered against my ribs. How long had he been there? He didn't ask who I was talking to. He didn't look angry or suspicious. His face was a placid, unreadable mask. "You should get some sleep, Audrey," he said, his voice completely flat. Then he turned and walked away. The casualness of it was more terrifying than any accusation. It was the first note in a symphony of silence that would eventually destroy everything. The first time I met Reese in person, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. We met at a small, cluttered cafe in the South End, a place with mismatched chairs and the rich, earthy smell of roasted coffee beans. It was a world away from the sterile, beige restaurants Marcus preferred. He was even more captivating in person. He had dark, unruly hair that fell into his eyes, and a laugh that made me want to say anything just to hear it again. He wasn't handsome in the clean, polished way Marcus was. He was real. He had a small scar above his eyebrow and ink staining the tips of his fingers. He leaned forward when I spoke, his intense gaze making me feel like I was the only person in the room. "So," he said, a playful smile on his lips, "tell me everything the poet-hating cynic from the internet thinks about the real world." We talked for 3 straight hours. 3 hours where I didn't once think about what to make for dinner, or whether the dry cleaning had been picked up, or if Marcus's quarterly reports were going well. We talked about art, about our childhoods, about the gnawing feeling of being misunderstood. When he brushed his fingers against mine to emphasize a point, a jolt of electricity, sharp and undeniable, shot up my arm. I floated home on a cloud of adrenaline and longing. The moment I stepped back into our apartment, the silence hit me like a physical blow. It was immaculate, a mausoleum of good taste. Marcus was on the sofa, a thick hardcover book about market volatility resting on his lap. He looked up, his expression as neutral as ever. "You were out for a while," he observed. "Just shopping," I lied, the word feeling clumsy and foreign in my mouth. I lost track of time. He marked his page with a finger, not looking at me. "Is that so?" "I had a lunch meeting canceled, so I took a drive. Went through the South End. There's a new coffee shop there, looks interesting. I think it was called the Gilded Sparrow." My blood ran cold. It was the name of the cafe, the one I had just left. I forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh? I didn't see it. How did you know about that place?" He finally looked up from his book, his eyes cool and distant. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "Just a random observation." He turned back to his book. But I knew. He wasn't just observing, he was watching. The silence was no longer empty, it was filled with unspoken knowledge. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, he turned to me, his hand resting briefly on my arm. "You seem happier lately, Audrey," he said, his voice soft. "It's nice to see." It wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. And in that moment, I knew I was playing a game I didn't understand, against an opponent who never revealed his strategy. But the thrill of Reese, of being seen and wanted, was too potent to give up. I foolishly thought I could play the game and win. The affair started a week later, in Reese's chaotic, beautiful studio. The room smelled of turpentine and dust and rain-soaked city streets. Sunlight streamed through a large, grimy window, illuminating dancing dust motes. It was messy and alive, and when he kissed me for the first time, surrounded by his half-finished canvases, it felt like waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. Everything with Reese was passion. Everything with Marcus was procedure. I became an expert in the art of deception. I invented a weekly pottery class, a book club that met on Thursday nights, a sudden interest in volunteering at a local art gallery. My life split into two distinct realities. With Reese, I was vibrant, desired, and alive. With Marcus, I was a ghost, drifting through a pristine, silent home. The guilt was a dull ache, easily ignored. I told myself I deserved this. Marcus had emotionally abandoned me years ago. He had his work, his portfolios, his silent approval of our perfect life. This was mine. But Marcus began his silent campaign. It was never overt, it was always subtle. A series of small, calculated moves designed to unravel me. One evening, he came home with a gift bag from a high-end department store. Inside was a bottle of perfume. It was a light, clean scent, almost sterile. "I thought you might like a change," he said, watching me unwrap it. The perfume I usually wore, a rich, musky jasmine, was the one Reese loved. The one, he said, lingered on his sheets after I left. "This one is more you, I think," Marcus added quietly. A week later, I came home to find he had completely reorganized my closet. Everything was color-coded, my shoes arranged in perfect, symmetrical rows. "I had some free time," he explained, leaning against the doorframe. He gestured to a blue silk dress hanging at the very front. "You haven't worn this in a while. I always loved it on you." "It's coming down." It was the dress I had worn the first day I met Reese. I felt a prickle of cold fear. He was showing me that he knew. He was in my space, rearranging my life, silently telling me that none of my secrets were safe. But he never raised his voice. He never accused me. He just watched, his calm, placid expression, a mask I couldn't tear away. The silence grew louder, more menacing. It was in the way he would pause the television when a scene involved infidelity, waiting for my reaction. It was in the casual questions about my pottery class, asking to see the pieces I'd supposedly made. "They're still at the kiln," I'd say, my heart pounding. "Of course," he'd reply, his smile never reaching his eyes. The pressure was immense. It was a quiet, relentless torture. The joy I found with Reese started to become tainted with a constant, gnawing anxiety. Reese, for his part, was growing impatient with the secrecy. "Leave him, Audrey," he'd whisper, his lips against my hair after we'd made love. "I hate this. I hate sharing you with a ghost. Come be with me. For real." I was trapped, squeezed between Reese's passionate demands and Marcus's suffocating, knowing silence. I felt like a string being pulled tighter and tighter from both ends, just waiting for the moment it would inevitably snap. And one afternoon, it did. My first real mistake was a stupid one, a careless one. After a stolen afternoon with Reese at a new photography exhibit, I shoved the ticket stub into my coat pocket and forgot about it. 2 days later, Marcus sent a few of our coats to the dry cleaner. That evening, I walked into our bedroom to find the small, crumpled ticket sitting perfectly centered on my vanity table, placed there like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. He never said a word about it. That was when the real mind games began. He was no longer just observing, he was actively participating in my secret life from a distance. One night at dinner, he put down his fork and looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, I was reading an article today about the philosopher Sartre, about existentialism. It's fascinating stuff. The idea that we're condemned to be free." I nearly choked on my wine. Reese and I had spent an entire afternoon debating Sartre in his studio just last week. It was our topic. Marcus had never shown the slightest interest in philosophy. His reading list consisted of the Wall Street Journal and biographies of successful CEOs. "Where did you read that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, just online somewhere," he said vaguely, before changing the subject. He started doing it more and more. He'd casually mention a photographer whose work Reese admired. He'd suggest we visit a neighborhood where Reese's studio was located, under the guise of trying a new restaurant. Each time, it was a subtle, poisoned dart, a reminder that he knew where I'd been, who I'd been with, what I'd been saying. My carefully constructed double life began to crumble under the weight of my own paranoia. I started seeing his hand in everything. Was the car parked across the street watching me? Did the doorman look at me differently? I jumped every time my phone buzzed, terrified it was Marcus with another piece of my own life that he'd somehow discovered. The passion with Reese was now laced with desperation. Our time together became frantic, shadowed by the constant fear of discovery. He saw the change in me. "You're a million miles away," he said one afternoon, pulling away from me. "What is he doing to you?" "Nothing," I insisted, a little too quickly. "He doesn't know anything." But Reese wasn't stupid. He saw the terror in my eyes. "This isn't working, Audrey. I can't live like this, and you're falling apart. You have to choose." And then, Marcus delivered the checkmate. He came home one evening, a rare, genuine smile on his face. In his hand were 2 plane tickets. "Surprise," he said. "I cleared my schedule. We're going to Tuscany for 2 weeks, just the 2 of us, to reconnect. It's our how." He handed me the ticket. My name, Audrey Hale, printed in neat, black letters. The departure date was in 10 days. It was the same day as Reese's 30th birthday. The day I had promised, swore, I would spend entirely with him. I looked at Marcus, at his smiling, expectant face. It was a perfect trap. There was no way to say no. No excuse I could invent that wouldn't shatter the entire facade. He had me. He had finally, silently, cornered me. And all I could do was smile back and say, "It's wonderful. I can't wait." The night before our scheduled flight to Italy felt like the final scene of a play. The air in the apartment was thick and heavy, charged with everything left unsaid. I was in the bedroom, mechanically folding clothes and placing them into a suitcase for a trip I knew we would never take. Each shirt, each pair of shoes, felt like a prop in a meaningless performance. Marcus walked in. He wasn't holding his phone or a book. He was holding a sleek, silver tablet. His face was unnervingly calm, the same placid expression he'd worn for months. But his eyes were different. They were cold, hard, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Audrey," he said, his voice level. "Sit down. Before we go anywhere, I think we need to review a few things." I sat on the edge of our perfectly made bed, my hands clasped in my lap to stop them from shaking. I braced myself for the explosion, for the shouting, for the accusations I had been dreading for so long. I was ready to cry, to scream, to blame him for his coldness, for driving me into another man's arms. But the explosion never came. He sat in the armchair across from me, crossed his legs, and tapped the screen of the tablet. He angled it so I could see. It wasn't a collection of compromising photos or angry text messages. It was worse. It was a spreadsheet. A cold, clinical breakdown of my life. "Let's start with finances," he said, his tone as detached as if he were discussing a corporate merger. "Over the past 6 months, your personal credit card shows 47 charges at cafes and restaurants in the South End, typically between 2 and 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Your stated schedule for those times was a pottery class in Cambridge." He swiped the screen. A map appeared, dotted with location pins. "This is the GPS data from your car's tracking system. It corroborates your visits to the South End. It also shows 3 overnight stays at the Hotel Lenox in the city center. The dates correspond to the business trips I took to London and Tokyo." My mouth was dry. I couldn't form words. He wasn't angry. He was just presenting data. He was dismantling my life with facts and figures. He swiped again. It was a log of our home network's data usage. "And finally, the router logs show a significant increase in data traffic from your devices to several social media and messaging platforms, often between midnight and 3 a.m. He looked up from the tablet, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. The emptiness in them was terrifying. "The pottery studio in Cambridge doesn't have a kiln. It closed down 2 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. He had laid my entire betrayal out on the table, not with passion, but with the chilling precision of an audit. He stripped me of every lie, every defense. There was nothing to argue against. There was no one to scream at. He had denied me the catharsis of a fight. He placed the tablet on the nightstand. "I've canceled the flight to Tuscany," he said simply. "My lawyer will be in contact with yours in the morning. Our prenuptial agreement is quite clear." He stood up and walked to the closet, pulling out a small, pre-packed duffel bag I hadn't noticed before. "You can stay here until you've made other arrangements," he said, his back to me. "I'll be at the Four Seasons." He zipped the bag, walked to the door, and paused, his hand on the knob. He didn't look back. "Goodbye, Audrey." Then he was gone. The heavy front door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the cavernous, silent apartment. I was left sitting on the bed, surrounded by the beautiful, empty life he had built and I had destroyed. The silence I had once railed against was now the only thing I had left. It was no longer his punishment, it was mine. In the crushing silence of the empty penthouse, my first instinct was to run toward the only comfort I thought I had left. My hands trembled as I dialed Reese's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice warm and sleepy. "Audrey? Is everything okay?" The story spilled out of me in a frantic, broken torrent. Marcus knew everything. The spreadsheet, the GPS, the lawyer. He was gone. "I'm free," I choked out, a desperate edge to my voice. He left. "I can be with you now. For real. After Doe's, anyway." I waited for his reply, expecting relief, joy, a promise that he was on his way over to rescue me. Instead, there was a long, heavy pause. "Audrey, wow," he finally said, his voice strained. "That's a lot." "A lot?" "Reese, this is what we wanted." "I know, I didn't think it would happen like this," he stammered. "A lawyer? A prenup? This is really messy." And in that moment, listening to the hesitation in his voice, I understood. Reese had been in love with the fantasy. He loved the stolen afternoons, the illicit thrill, the idea of being the passionate artist, saving the beautiful, neglected wife from her gilded cage. He was not in love with the messy, complicated reality of a bitter divorce, of financial repercussions, of a woman who was now completely and desperately reliant on him. The drama he craved was the romantic kind, not the legal, soul-crushing kind. I need some time to think," he said. It was the coward's classic farewell. He never called back. He disappeared from my life as quickly as he had entered it, a ghost who left behind nothing but the wreckage he'd helped create. Marcus's lawyer was as efficient and ruthless as he was. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed without reading, laughing it off as a formality, was ironclad. I walked away with almost nothing. The penthouse, the art, the life of effortless luxury, it all vanished. Months bled into one another. My new life was a muted, grayscale version of my old one. I found a small, dark apartment that always smelled faintly of damp. I got a job managing a small, pretentious art gallery, selling overpriced pieces to people who reminded me of who I used to be. The irony was not lost on me. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was walking home, my head down against the wind. When I looked up, I saw him. Marcus was across the street, waiting at a crosswalk. He was with a woman. She wasn't a model or an heiress. She looked normal. A teacher, maybe. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head tilted back. And Marcus was smiling. It wasn't the polite, tight-lipped smile he used for corporate events. It was a real smile. A genuine, unburdened expression of happiness that reached his eyes. He looked lighter, he looked free. He looked happier than I had ever seen him in all the years we were together. He never saw me. The light changed, and they walked on, disappearing into the crowd, just two people in a city, living their life. I stood frozen on the sidewalk as the crowd flowed around me. I once thought the worst thing in the world was the suffocating silence of a loveless marriage. I was wrong. The truest, loudest, most unbearable silence is the one that echoes inside a life you have emptied yourself. I had traded my gilded cage for a prison of my own making. One with no bars, no walls, but no escape. And I was its sole, lonely occupant.